Okay. So we're going to start soon a new chapter in the book. First, I'll open with a Torah. We read this past week, Parshas Tetzaveh, where we read about the garments, the clothes of the Kohanim, Bigdei Kiuna, where we've got 8 different types of clothes that the Kohen Gadol wore and 4 of the regular Kohanim. And the Torah expresses the reason for this, for them wearing these types of clothes, beautiful clothes. V'asita v'gedei kodesh la'aron u'lvanav lechavod u'letifaret. To glorify, to respect and glorify the Kohanim. So there's something interesting that we should look into from the point of view of external versus internal features of a person. On one hand, we see that it's important to dress up mechubad in a respectable way and presentable way, and not look like a schlepper or some stained clothes with stains and things of that sort, to try to keep ourselves good looking. On the other hand, we know that the most important part of our personality is from within. Who are we really? Not the way we necessarily present ourselves to others. So, the idea behind what the Torah is telling us is really that we should fit. It should fit our internal features and the way we externalize it. Meaning that a person's personality should be of such that he's worthy of wearing these types of clothes, which are lechavod u'letifaret. Meaning that the Kohen is not just wearing clothes to make himself feel important and be important. Rather, he really is of a personality, of a holy personality that deserves wearing these types of clothes of lechavod u'letifaret, bigdei kodesh, as he wore in the Beis Hamikdash. Sometimes, unfortunately, there are people who disguise themselves by wearing type of clothes that really don't fit their personality. They make themselves look very important when they really aren't. They make themselves look religious when they really aren't. Make themselves look like respectable, honorable people, and they aren't because they cheat and lie and so on and so forth. So it can only work that the Bigdei Kodesh, these holy garments, are lechavod u'letifaret, respect the person wearing them and glorify him if he's truthfully worthy of it. On the other hand, we learn from the Sefer HaChinuch, Mitzvah Tetzayin, he writes that Achrei HaMa'asim yimashchu halevavot. Sometimes the way we act externally influences our personality internally. If we do a lot of chesed, even if we're not such good-hearted people necessarily, but the more we do, the more we act upon things, and the more we become such people. The Rambam, for example, says that if a person has, let's say, 100 shekel to give to tzedakah, so one should try to give it out slowly, one by one, meaning 100 shekel, you give 10 shekel a day. Why is that better than giving for 10 days? Why is that better than giving once, 100 shekel at once? Because, says the Rambam, if you give 10 times 10 shekel, then you get used to giving. It makes you, it changes your internal personality being a giver, because you start getting used to doing this thing, being such a person by doing the action repeatedly over and over again. Whereas if you give it just once, so it's very nice. You've given a nice chunk of money, you've given a nice piece, a large amount for tzedakah, but it doesn't affect your personality that much because you don't get used to it by doing it over and over again. So it really works both ways. By wearing like special clothes, like we said before, in turn that can affect a person's personality to be a very respectable person, because he says, if I'm wearing such clothes, how can I act non-holy? How can I act insincerely? So the clothes can have influence over the personality, and the personality can in turn, person can be worthy of wearing certain clothes. So it goes in both directions. But after all, the main feature, of course, is our personality. The main focus that we should try our best to perfect is who we are really, and not what we seem externally to people. So just to connect this by a vort I thought of this year in the Megillah Esther, wasn't far that we heard the Megillah. We find in the Megillah that there are two people who the Megillah describes as Tov Lev. Although the way it's used, the term used in the Megillah is not the regular term we're used to when a person is a good-hearted person. It has to do with the fact that they were very happy and overly joyous. That's what it means there in the Megillah Tov Lev. But still there's a connection to being good-hearted by a person being very, very happy, so he's willing to give others his good side. He's willing to present his good side to others. Who are we talking about? It says about Achashverosh, Ketov Lev HaMelech Bayayin. And it says about Haman, when he returned after the first feast with Esther, with Esther, it says, Sameach v'tov lev, that he was happy and joyous. But again, the term here is tov lev. Now we know as a feature, it's the highest and most important feature a person could own. We know that from Pirkei Avos. So Elazar ben Arach, the student of Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai, after Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai had asked 5 of his students to go out and search for the most important quality attribute a person could have, so Elazar ben Arach comes back and says, Lev Tov. That's the most important feature. Just be good to everyone. Be nice. Be kind. And that's above all the other 4 other features that they came back with. Ain Tova, Chaver Tov, Shachen Tov, Aroeh et Hanolad. All the others are all included in Lev Tov. That's how Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai summarizes after his 5 students explore this issue. So the question is, how come the Megillah presents Achashverosh and Haman as Tovei Lev? After all, they're very cruel, very bad, had very rotten personalities. So why is that the description? The answer is the Megillah itself explains to us. Ketov lev HaMelech bayayin. Achashverosh was tov lev bayayin. Only due to drinking so much. Then he's on a high. He has no idea what he's doing and saying, and then he's nice to everyone. He spreads smiles. He gives everyone. He invites everyone for his feast. 180 days. Throws a ball. Anyone can come eat and enjoy, because he's all drunk. It's not his real self. His real self is being selfish. He's being mean. He came out in the end, because the wine brings out in the end the real self. It's nichnas yain etzas sod, and he kills Vashti, his wife, for not coming in when he called her. And Haman the same. Sameach v'tov lev. That's only because he was the only one invited. He says to his wife and followers, he says to them, Rak oti zimina Esther. I was the only one invited to the king and queen's palace for their meal, for the feast. So he's full of pride and boastfulness, and that makes him tov lev. At the moment he's on top, the moment he gets what he needs, he's all worked up with his pride and kavod. Then he can be nice to everyone else. If someone would step on him, oy vavoy, he wants to get rid of him, like Mordechai and the entire Jewish people. So it's not real. These circumstances of Achashverosh and Haman, of being tovei lev, is totally external. Is totally dependent on something external that happens to them, or they do, or they take, so in order to feel, in order to be able to be good to others. But really, when the effect goes away of the wine or of the boastfulness, then they're back to being the cruel people that they were. On the other hand, Mordechai and Esther, they were real tovei lev. They don't need the placard announcing tov lev. For Achashverosh and Haman, they need a placard. They need everyone to see that they're good, because they really aren't. But Mordechai and Esther, they are truthfully, internally, from within themselves, they're good people. How do we see that? By Mordechai, it says, "Uvechol yom vayom, Mordechai mitelech b'shar hamelech, ladat et shalom Esther u'ma ye'aseh vah." Every single day, b'chol yom vayom. It doesn't even say b'chol yom, which we could say u'bo kechulo, that most of the time he went to see how to check on Esther. It says b'chol yom vayom, every single day. For how long was he checking on Esther to see how she was? It says Rav Kalibach, he calculates in the Megillah there, 9 years. For 9 years, every single day, going to the palace to check how is Esther doing. That's tuv lev. That's no wine necessary and no placards announcing that he's good. He just does it because it's from within. No one can ever do such a thing if it's not real, because everyone misses a day of being caring for someone. Let's say if he was sick or if he was busy a certain day. No, not one day went by without him going to see how Esther was, and it's all a very humble way. In a very humble way, people don't know about it. The Megillah tells us the people then probably didn't notice him going there. He didn't make a noise out of it. He didn't make it a big thing. And Esther, of course, she was tovat lev because she gave up her entire life for saving Am Yisrael. The fact that she was taken to Achashverosh's palace, but still she sacrificed her life totally to the point where she went to the king when she wasn't called upon. She could have been killed that moment. That's tuv lev. She didn't ask for any prize or reward or glorifying her name. She just did it because that's who she was. And that's the main idea we should be taking, that our personalities should be of such and not external things that make us as if such people. So again, the clothes of the Kohanim weren't there just to serve as, look at me, like something external. Here I'm beautiful. Here I'm exceptional. No, because they were people with such personalities like the Kohanim had, so they were worthy of wearing these clothes. Okay. Mezonot Hashem should be perfecting ourselves as much as we can from within and acting really good because that's our nature, and not because we want everyone to see, and not because we have any external things that drive us in that direction. It's to come from within, and then the influence and the help to others will come along with it. Okay, so now we're beginning a new chapter in the book of Dinei Berkat Mezonos Ume'ein Shalosh. Until now, we've done the Borei Nefashos Bracha after Bracha, and the Ha'etz, Ha'adama, Shehakos we mentioned a lot. Now, specifically Mezonos and Alamichya. Ah, oh, I didn't know that. Okay, so לרפואה שלמה ליהודית בת שמחה נחמה, or נחמה. Yes, שמחה נחמה. Okay. In English, that's how it's spelled? Nachma? Okay. Oh, wow. This is Jano and Lila's mother? Wow. Okay. Yes, Shbir Fuah Shlema. Wow. Stroke and surgery. Wow. Okay, so Fuah Shlema betoch Shach Olei Israel. Okay. So the uniqueness about Birkat Mezonos, we'll start off with this. Unlike other foods that when we have combinations of different types of brachos, we said that generally we go by majority. We go by the quantity majority. So if we have, like we spoke about, soups or salads, vegetable, fruit salads, you go by majority. You see the majority in your plate. Doesn't matter how it was prepared in the pot or in the serving bowl. In your plate, if you have majority of one type, that's the bracha you choose. If you have a combination, that's the bracha you choose by going according to majority. If it's sort of equal, so we said either you could separate, take on your fork or spoon only one type and say the bracha on that, and then take only the other type, say the bracha on that, and then you eat the rest together. That's one way to deal with equal amounts. And the other is to say the lower level bracha, which is more inclusive. Let's say if you have a combination of ha'adama and shehakol, and they're approximately the same amounts, then you could say shehakol, which is more inclusive than ha'adama, because shehakol works for everything, and ha'adama just works for things that go from the ground. So those are two ways to deal with mixtures of foods. When they're approximately equal, when there's a majority, then you go by the majority and you say only one bracha, whichever the majority of food is in that mixture. But mezonos acts differently. But it's under one condition. We're talking about a case where the mezonos was cooked or baked within the dish we're being served, we're eating now. If you bake or cook something that's had mezonos in it, together with other foods, then what's different about mezonos? That no matter what the amount of the mezonos is, even if it's a minority within the mixture that you have, still the entire food, the entire dish will be mezonos. It's a very, very important rule. It's called kol sheyeshbo. That's what the Gemara calls it. Kol sheyeshbo. The moment there's a little bit of mezonos involved combined in the food, then it's mezonos for the entire food. But again, providing it was cooked or baked together. We'll soon see various different examples how this works, but it's a very, very important rule. And there's another condition, two conditions that this should work. Again, one is that cooked or baked together. The other is that the mezonos ingredient there is not there just to stick everything together. Rather, it's there to give some taste, some flavor to the food. It's meant to give flavor, or it's meant as to fill you up, to satiate you. Only then do we have this rule, do we go by the rule of kol sheyeshbo, of the fact that even if it's a minority, but the mezonos are more important. Why is this true? Because mezonos are always more important than all other types of brachos. Shehakol, ha'etz, ha'adama, whatever other bracha it may be, mezonos is more important. Why? Because for mezonos, we're talking about the 5 grains: wheat, barley, spelt, oats, and chiffon, rye. Thank you. Rye. So those 5 can potentially become bread. If you make if they're ground into flour and you bake them with some water, then they're bread, and the bread requires a motzi and birkas hamazon. That's what makes them important. That even if it's not bread, if it's only mezonos, because it's combined with all the other foods, which is not bread, because bread is only water and flour with a little bit of additional ingredients that are less than the water. But the moment it's combined with so much other ingredients, and it's mezonos. But the mezonos has a potential to be bread. Only the 5 grains can become a motzi if they're prepared as a bread. Any other flour that you make bread out of will not be a motzi. If you make bread out of rice flour or corn flour, cornmeal, it's not going to be a motzi. Even if it looks like bread and it acts like bread, but it's not bread. It's shehakol, because it's all ground into flour, so it loses its original appearance, so it's shehakol. You've got a shehakol bread. Those who are sensitive to gluten, they have these types of breads many times, and they're all shehakol. They have an issue with Pesach coming up, with the matzah, not simple. I understand there's oat matzah, which is good for them, which they can have, but I also understand that it's a terrible taste, so I guess they don't eat too much of it. But in any case, so that's the reason why the 5 grains, when they're combined in any food, they take over the bracha, even if they're in the minority, providing it was cooked or baked together with it, and that it was added, the ingredient was added in order to add flavor. It doesn't mean that you have to taste the flour, the mezonos part in it. It means that it tastes differently. It's an ingredient to add flavor, making it a different flavor than without. That's the idea of the ingredient adding taste, that you feel the difference in that food if you add it or don't. That's one. Or that it's there as a filler, that if it's there to fill you up, and otherwise you won't be full. So all that combined together makes it a Mezonos Bracha for that combination. Now we'll talk about specifics. Unlike in what case do we not say Mezonos because it's not there to add flavor or to fill you up. It's, for example, when it's just there to stick things together. That's why it's added. Or it's there to make it more puffy, or to make it larger, look larger, to puff it up. But really, it's not adding any flavor or not there to fill you. Or it's adding some a smell, a nice fragrance to the food, or it adds a look. It's just there for the looks, to look nice. You're adding the flour or the mezonos ingredient. All those reasons do not make the mezonos important enough that if it's the minority, then even if it's a minority, you say mezonos. For all those reasons, you go by majority. Only if it's adding flavor and or as a filler, only then do we say that even minority overrides all the other ingredients, and we say mezonos. So let's take a few actual examples. As we go along this chapter, we'll see more and more examples of this type. Some of them will be quite surprising, I assume, to some of us. So let's take the first example is a cheesecake. A cheesecake sometimes calls for flour combined with the cheese itself. It's all mixed together. And sometimes it's the crust. It's the lower layer, the bottom layer of the cake is mezonos. In both cases, it's most usually a minority. In a cheesecake, you have so many other ingredients, the cheese and the sugar and all the other ingredients, vanilla, that you may use to make the cake. and you're adding a little bit of flour. So if it's when it's combined within the cheesecake itself, not as a lower, as a crust, as a bottom layer, then you have to check what is the reason you add the mezonos component. Are you adding the flour just in order to make everything stick together firmly? And then we go by majority, as we said before, and we say shehakol. Or are we adding it for the flavor? Or are we adding it to that it should fill us up more? So then it's mezonos, no matter how much of the flour is in there related to the other ingredients.
I have an example where this comes up.
Yes.
I don't know if other people have this, but I make peanut butter squares that have graham crackers in it. So It's always been a question, what's the purpose of the graham crackers? Is if it's for consistency, so you make the shehakol, but if it's for the flavor, since it's mezonos, even though it's a minority, you make mezonos, and I don't even know the answer to the question.
Oh, you don't know the answer to the question?
No, maybe other people do. I don't know.
The graham crackers with peanut butter squares. What's the point there for adding the graham crackers? For the consistency or for the taste, the flavor? Rivki is saying probably both. Okay.
That's exactly what I think. So I never know what bracha to make on it. So I always don't want to eat them because I have no idea what's the right bracha.
Oh, what the bracha should be. Yeah. So they have a sweetness in them themselves. It's not just the added ingredients, the added sugar or whatever. So it's serving both purposes here. That's interesting.
I guess if it's serving both purposes, you'd make a mezonot because it has to do with the flavor.
Right. That's what I would say as well. Yeah, that's what we think here too. I'll tell you what first of all, we have to decide we have to learn who is the one to decide for us. Why is it in there? Is it the person? So
it started with my brother-in-law, and he always asked me. He said, "I'm the one who made it. What's the purpose that I put it in for?" Exactly.
That's the answer. The answer is not the person eating it, rather the person making it. They're the ones who decide. Did you hear, Sarah? Rivki's asking.
No, I didn't hear.
Rivki's asking that you're doing it because the recipe calls for it. It's not, you don't have a specific intent when you're doing it, right?
Precisely.
Okay, precisely.
That's why I don't know what to answer.
Right.
And then he always says, I'm not going to eat these. We have no idea.
Because you're not helping him decide what bracha it is. Wow.
If it's a cheesecake with a thin crust and then the cheese, and you eat it together, you said it's
right. No, the crust, even a thin layer, bottom layer is mezonos because the crust is definitely, it's all mezonos. The crust itself is completely mezonos. It's not added. Oh, the difference is because it's not.
Right. My crackers are in a peanut butter mixture.
Right. The moment you mix it inside, so it could be that that's only for the texture now and not for the taste.
I would believe that it's for the taste as well, because graham crackers have a very distinct taste. You would put something else to hold it together. There's definitely a taste factor, in my opinion.
I agree. Otherwise, they could
right.
use saltines. To hold it together.
Right. Right. Or just flour or something. Right. That's a good point. If you use specific graham crackers, that most probably has to do with the taste as well. Yeah, that's a very good point. Otherwise, you could use other things. Right. Okay, so that we solved the issue. You can tell your brother-in-law that he can have the peanut butter squares.
Make a mezonos.
Definitely mezonos, right? Definitely mezonos. So that's a good point. That otherwise you would use different type of cracker or just flour if it was for the consistency only. Yeah. So
I guess graham crackers does have a specific consistency, but but it's probably true.
right. Yeah. Specific taste as well. Yeah. Yeah. Distinct taste. Okay, that's very good. Phil Malka, by the way, really addresses this issue, not by peanut butter squares necessarily, but he speaks about tzitzotim perurei lechem. Before we go back to the cheesecake, tzitzotim perurei lechem. That's something to be more complicated. You're using breadcrumbs to help you create meatballs, right, or hamburgers. Oh, so by that, most of the time it's there just in order to stick it all together, consistency, or to make it more fluffy, more like a puffed, a more like puffed, larger size of the balls. He says the falafel balls, they add breadcrumbs, meatballs, and so on. So if it's just there for the consistency or to puff it up, then it's all shehakol. Even though we're talking about breadcrumbs, breadcrumbs, it's all shehakol because they're nullified by being the minority, and they're not there to add flavor. But if it's there in order to add flavor or to fill you up more, like back in the day in Europe, it was very expensive to buy fish, so they used to grind the fish and add a lot of breadcrumbs, not majority, still minority, but they use a lot of breadcrumbs in order to have the fish fill you up more. That's the whole idea of the gefilte fish. The famous Ashkenazi gefilte fish. It was partially due to that they were poor. So they couldn't afford actual whole chunks of fish. They had to grind it with all the bones and everything, and they added breadcrumbs to fill you up. Rice, much less meat. Right, right, exactly. That's a lot of times the consideration, the costs. Right. Yeah. So that's a good case, a situation where you have stuffed cabbage. If you have the majority rice versus the cabbage itself and the meat, so you would say mezonos because rice deserves mezonos. By the way, rice is not one of the 5 grains. Therefore, by rice, it's never true to say kol sheyeshbo. The moment there's a little bit of rice cooked together with all the rest, and it's automatic mezonos. That's not true. Rice we deal with, even though the bracha is mezonos, rice is very unique. The bracha is mezonos, but yet we don't consider it as kol sheyeshbo. It doesn't have that important feature in it to be to nullify everything else to it just because it's there and it's important. It's not like that. It goes by majority, like all other foods. So if the stuffed cabbage has mainly rice versus all the other ingredients, then it's mezonos. If it's minority because there's more meat in there, then it's shehakol. The cabbage itself would probably be the least amount because it's just surrounding it, and it's all stuffed inside with stuff. So the volume of what's inside is greater than the surrounding cabbage around. So it'd be either shehakol or mezonos, depending on the inside, which is more the meat or the rice. Back to the mezonos, the real mezonos, the 5 grains. So
we're just getting back to the stuffed cabbage. I don't mean to complicate it too much, but you're purposely not making meatballs. You're putting that cabbage around your meat. There's no bracha for the cabbage? Doesn't have any?
No. Even though you're right, it's definitely there for reason. You like the taste, you like the flavor of the cabbage around it, but it's all cooked together. It's all as one chunk of food. It's not like having a salad, a cabbage salad next to your chicken and next to your meat. Then, of course, each dish, each separate food requires its own bracha. Here, it was all cooked together as one. So even though you're making it a different dish here that calls for cabbage to add flavor, but it's nullified to what's inside, because it's, after all, one piece of food. It's all one entity, sort of speaking, and we go by the majority. Same as if we cut up a fruit salad. So we sometimes add pieces of banana or pineapple to the rest of the fruits that were cut up, and sometimes we don't. So there's a reason why we want to add the banana and pineapple, because we want that flavor inside as well. But still, if it's the minority versus all the fruits that are cut up inside there, so we don't say a separate hadama. That's always the rule. Even if we're interested in a unique flavor and a special flavor, and that's why we add a certain ingredient, it doesn't mean that ingredient requires its own bracha. It all goes by majority when it's a combination and all one entity, and not when it's totally separate on your plate.
Okay, thank you. Just getting back to the meatballs, one more, sorry.
Okay,
If you're using flavored breadcrumbs, then you have a whole other issue.
Aha, flavored breadcrumbs. Then it's there for the flavor, really?
Well, instead of adding spices, you have it in your breadcrumbs.
But then the spices,
I
right?
don't think so.
Right, because the spices are giving you that special
It's the same
flavor,
breadcrumb, and then they add spices
and
to
not
breadcrumbs.
the
No
right.
difference.
The
It's just
breadcrumbs
easier,
themselves,
one less step.
right?
Same difference.
So
Right,
it doesn't change it if there's flavored breadcrumbs.
right. It wouldn't
Okay.
change the idea, because the bread itself is usually added for the consistency, and the spices are add the flavor, but it's just the spices adding the flavor and not the bread itself. Right,
Okay, thank you.
right.
And it's just one
Okay.
less step for you, so you do it in one.
Right, right. You get one less step to work. Right. Okay. So again, it all depends on the person making the meatballs or the person making the hamburgers. Are they adding the breadcrumbs for just consistency, or to bind everything, or are they adding it for actual flavor or for filling us up more on this food than if we would have only the meat? It wouldn't fill us up, and we would need to have more and more meatballs or hamburgers, and then we won't have enough. So the interest is for people to fill up on a meatball or on a hamburger more so because there's bread inside. It all depends on the reason. So on this, in the footnote, Rav Phil Malka writes, "Rov osei haktitzot einam yod'im beofen barur madua asoim lechem." You ask majority of those who make meatballs or hamburgers, they don't know why they're adding the bread. Ela seizot ki kacha matkon. They add it because that's what it calls for in the recipe. Right, like the peanut butter squares. They don't know why. It's just because that's a recipe calls for. Yeah, so I guess in some cases we do know. Mostly, right. And nowadays, again, it depends. People who are unfortunately not well-to-do, or a little poor, so they do add it for the flavor. Like, I'll tell you what, in yeshivot, ulpenot, all these institutional foods, definitely the reason they're adding the breadcrumbs is definitely in order to fill the fellows, the girls up on less meat, because it's expensive. So for them, it could really very well be that it's used as a filler, and therefore it's mezonos. You wouldn't say a motzi, by the way. You wouldn't say a motzi, even though it's breadcrumbs, because they were crushed, broken to less than kazait. Each crumb is, of course, less than kazait, much less than the kazait. And less than the kazait that was then cooked or fried or, well, not baked really, because baked you keep to the same process as bread was. But cooked or fried, then it changes the bracha of the breadcrumbs to mezonos, because they're adding flavor, of course. You're adding flavor and cooking it or frying it so that it changes, the process changes the bracha to Mezonos. So breadcrumbs that are there to fill the guys up, like in yeshiva, to rulpinot, to have less meat because of the expense. So by them, it's a Mezonos hamburger. Whereas in our homes, usually it's the opposite. It's mainly the meat, and you're just adding the breadcrumbs for consistency, and therefore it's shehakol. It all depends on the reason this ingredient was added. Okay. Okay, so that's for that. Going back to the cheesecake a moment. So we said like this: if it's a bottom layer of the crust on the bottom that's totally mezonos, and on top of it is the cheesecake itself, so then it depends. This, by the way, connects to Tova's question from before. It depends how you're eating it. Some people like eating it by layers. They like first eating the top layer with only the cheesecake, and then they eat up the crust, or they don't even eat the crust. Some, for diet purposes, can resist eating the crust and they eat only the cheese, even though that's also not that dietetic, but it's better. You're better off that way than having the crust. So if you're eating, no matter if you're having them both, but you're eating them separately, you're first eating up the cheese part and then eating the crust, then it's two separate brachos. Because you're treating the cheesecake as if it were two separate foods on the plate. It doesn't matter that it's stuck and glued to each other. The way you're eating it shows that you're eating it as two separate foods. And therefore, it deserves two brachos. You say shehakol over the cheese and mezonos over the crust, separately. Even though it's baked together. It was baked as one chunk, as one piece. But you're eating it separately. That's, by the way, the same bracha for krembo, famous Israeli krembo. We have whipped cream on top with covered by chocolate, and the bottom has a biscuit on the bottom. So there also, 99% of the people who eat them separately. I know I once heard it was like a skit, a funny skit, that people were arguing, do they first eat the biscuit and then the whipped cream, first and then a biscuit, or take a bite with both together, or first the chocolate covering and then the inside, whatever, all different ways of eating the krembo. Or the
Same discussion about an
Oreo cookie, right.
It's not as complicated
Right.
together, you open it, it's like a whole
Right. The same idea. Open and eat the cream inside, or the cookie itself. Right. All these things. You got a whole fight of how to eat the Oreo. Right. So in any case, that's the same idea. If you have them separate, the whipped cream and chocolate, and then you eat the biscuit, then you say two separate brachos. What's that? Right, it's very high. You can't fit the whole thing in your mouth. Right. You could, it's inconvenient, but you could take bites from the bottom part, the biscuit, together with part of the krembo. Right. It would smush. Yeah, I'm saying it's inconvenient. By the way, that's why you don't have to make an extra effort to say the mezonos first, because usually in the order of hamaga esh, mezonos goes before shehakol. So if you would have to say mezonos first, you have to take a bite from the biscuit before you start eating the whipped cream to say mezonos first. But since it's very inconvenient, if you can, why not? It's still the better way. But if it's inconvenient, you could start with the shehakol, eat up the whipped cream, and then have the biscuit and say mezonos. So with the cheesecake, again, if you're having a cheesecake that on top it doesn't have any flour, or the flour there is just for the consistency, and you have the bottom crust, so if you're eating them separately, you say two separate brachos. And then again, better if you can first take a piece of the crust and say mezonos, and then and then take the cheese part and say shehakol. But if it's very inconvenient, then you start with the shehakol and then you get to the mezonos. But if you're eating the whole slice, the whole piece together, and that's possible by a cheesecake, you can do that. You just take the spoon and dig all the way down, and each spoonful, you're having them both combined together, the crust and the cheese together. So if you're eating them combined together, then it's only mezonos. Your bracha is only mezonos. Because we said this is kol sheyeshbo. This is a case where it was baked together. The mezonos part and the cheese part are baked together. And although the mezonos is a teeny amount of the cheesecake, and it's very insignificant usually. It's not the best part of the cake usually. But still, since you're having them together, and it's there for sure to add flavor, there's nothing consistency-wise for the crust. The crust is totally on its own. So it's definitely mezonos. And you're eating them together, so the entire cake will be under mezonos bracha only. Because of kol sheyeshbo, enough that there's a little bit of mezonos, and we say mezonos over the entire cake. The last bracha on this, it would usually be brei nefashos, because as much as we eat from the cheese, of the piece of cheesecake, as much as we have even a large piece of cheesecake, still the crust is very thin usually, and we're eating it slowly. We're not gobbling it up the whole thing at once. So within 4 minutes to finish kazait mezonos, which is only of the crust, that usually is not done. Usually you don't eat that way. So if you're not having kazait within 4 minutes of just the crust, I mean, you could have it combined with the cheese itself, but that all together within 4 minutes, you had a kazait of, which is approximately the volume of half or 2/3 of a slice of bread, as we said many times. So that's a lot of crust. We're not having that within 4 minutes usually, so you can't say alamichya. But you did have a kazait of the cheese part of the cheesecake within 4 minutes. That's easy. It's usually yummy, and you finish it up very quickly. You finish a nice amount of the cheese within 4 minutes. So you say only brei nefashos. So the first bracha will be mezonos. Last bracha will be brei nefashos. That could be many cakes. Correct. Chocolate mousse cakes also, right? Right. It's not going to even be kazait. You're not going to get to kazait ever, right? Right. There are many cakes that have just a layer of mezonos, sometimes on top, sometimes on the bottom, sometimes both. But altogether, you're not going to have a kazait within 4 minutes, correct? Although it's a cake and you say mezonos, but yet it's brei nefashos in the end. Because the main ingredient component is the shehakol part, which only it can be eaten within 4 minutes, because that within 4 minutes. Okay, now there's also a type of cheesecake where in the cheese itself, you have some flour or some crushed cookies or something that's combined in the cheese itself, not just as a crust on the bottom, but it's part of the cake itself. So there, it goes back to the discussion we had before. What's the reason? What is the reason we added this mezonos component to the cheese itself, to the cheese part of the cheesecake? Is it for flavor, or to fill us up, or and then in both such cases it will be mezonos, even the cheese part of the cheesecake, because it's kol sheyeshbo. Then it doesn't matter how much flour we added. The moment it's there to add taste or to fill us, then it's mezonos. But if it's just for the consistency, to bind everything together, to puff it up, then it's shehakol. So again, it's quite complicated. You have to ask the cook, the person who made the cake, what it consists of, and what's the reason it consists of those ingredients. It's not so simple. It's really make a study of why things are added. I guess the people who make up the recipes, they probably know best why they called for these and these ingredients in the recipe. Usually it's a binder, right? In many recipes it's a binder, right? It's a binder, but sometimes it's there for the flavor. Like if it's a specific type of cracker that you have to crush, then usually, like Tova said, has to do with the unique flavor that cracker has. Right. So yeah, but it's usually a binder. That's true. And then it would not require mezonos if it's just a binder, and it's only the bracha that's the main ingredient there that covers all. Okay. Let's continue to another case. Okay, we have these various different types of wafers. Kifkef, Pesach Zman, the regular wafers, Wafel chocolate, Wafel limon, all those, vanilla. So all these cases, it's very interesting. On one hand, no question at all in our minds that the main taste we get from it, the main enjoyment we get from it is the chocolate, is the sugar, is the vanilla, all those flavors and all those ingredients that surround the wafer itself, in between layers, top layers, all that, that's the main part of it. The wafer usually has very little taste, and it's not the main part at all for us. It's not the reason we're having this. But even so, on the other end, there's no question that the reason there's a wafer there is in order to enhance the taste, although maybe very little compared to the chocolate and all other nougat, all other flavors that are there and ingredients that make up this flavor. But it's definitely not there. The wafer part, the mezonos part, is definitely not there for consistency because it's just in between layers. It's not even combined in the chocolate. And it's not there for puffing it up. Usually, that's not the idea. The idea is actually to add some flavor, even we can call it crunchiness. Crunchiness is also a type of enjoyment of the flavor of the food. You're enjoying the food better because it's crunchy. So, therefore, all these types of wafers are mezonos. They're all mezonos. Even though you could say what's going on, it's such a thin layer in between, and it's barely, it's not at all the reason why I'm eating this Pesach Zman or Kivke, which we shouldn't be eating too much of that either in any case, but once in a while, especially after Purim. We have loads and loads in the house, so I have to somehow get rid of it. So the bracha is mezonos, because no matter how much of the other ingredients there are, kol sheyesh bo, layer, it deserves mezonos because it's there for the taste. It's there for adding some flavor. The crunchiness itself even is considered like a flavor. So therefore it's mezonos. But again, in most cases, when you eat a chocolate bar that has this wafer in it, in most cases, it's just a thin layer, even if it has a few thin layers. But after all, within 4 minutes to have a kazait and mezonos is usually not the case. It depends how large the wafer is. Sometimes they have double size, big ones, and you finish within 4 minutes because it's so tasty. You gobble it up. So you could sometimes reach the mezonos ingredient component of kazait within 4 minutes, but usually not. Usually that you wouldn't reach a kazait. Right, it's so thin. That's what I said. Usually a regular size one, a Twix has much more, I don't remember what it looks like, Twix. It has much more,
So it's like a finger.
yeah.
Like the whole bottom is solid, not layered.
Okay. And it's a solid biscuit. It's not just like a wafer type. Yeah, very thin layer. Yes, Pesach Zman is a very thin layer. Yes, very thin layer. But it could be some of them are more like a biscuit type layer, which is larger and better. And then you have more mezonos. You always have to assess how much mezonos you have in there to decide if this is all for the last bracha, for the al michya, or nefashos, and to assess how much mezonos have you eaten within 4 minutes. Is it a kazait or not? It's sometimes not easy to figure it out, but usually it's quite noticeable. It's quite possible to figure out how much of that is inside there. Okay.
I got one from Mishloach Manot. Would you like me to open it or should I drop it at your house for you to research?
That was a good one. No, in our house, we don't need anymore. We have so much of the stuff.
No, this is for research purposes.
Yeah, for
That's
research
all.
purposes, yeah. Well, if you want to read it afterwards, you can open it now. Yeah, right. If you'd like one now, then you can open it and show us. But if not, then,
I'll open it. It's okay. It's not Bal Tashkent if you throw it out.
okay, right.
Okay.
If it's around, you can give Gilad.
What?
Let's see what it looks
Can you
like.
see it?
Oh, wow. It's very gooey. Yeah.
But it's got a big cookie at the bottom.
Ah, right. The Twix. Yeah, the Twix. Yeah, I see. Wow, it's a thick cookie. Yes. It's a thick cookie.
It's a thick cookie, caramel covered with chocolate.
Aha, wow, it looks yummy. Thick
I'm
cookie.
sorry, I just have to go to Tova's for a minute.
Come on over. I'm happy to give it to you.
Okay. Do you see how many grams is on the package? Does it say?
Oh, wait, I don't have reading glasses. It's a small one.
Small one? Yeah, snack size. Yeah.
It's a snack size and I can't see what it doesn't say.
Um,
Oh, it says allergy information.
Doesn't say it's anyway the weight and not the volume. We go by volume. If I could assess correctly, it didn't seem like the entire snack had kazait. It didn't seem so. Right. If we eat one, it won't have. Right.
Just comparing it to my finger, does that help?
Oh wow, it's really small. Yeah, that's really small. Right. No. So the snack size one for sure would not be a ala michi at the end. You need only one. Right.
All right, so we know what you do at the end, but you don't say mezonot on that? Okay, I'll tell you honestly, I've eaten them before. I've always said shahakol. I never realized how much cookie was in there.
No. It's definitely mezonos. We're saying like this, even the Pesach Zman and Kif Kef, which are very thin layers of mezonos component, it's still mezonos. Because the first.
So this is definitely mezonot.
Definitely mezonot, no question. Definitely mezonot.
Okay.
After bracha, we were checking. The after bracha for only one is definitely bari nefashos. Rifki has here on the phone. It's 50 grams, the regular bar. Now that's in weight.
This is 50 grams. This is very small. And I can't, it doesn't say any weight on it. But then again, I guess you'll have to have a few.
Right. Yeah, she has on her phone the same size as you showed us now, and it's 50 grams. But that's including everything. That's including the caramel and the chocolate and everything. Yeah.
So in America, you buy king size.
Oh, yeah?
and 4 of these.
Oh, wow.
So if you eat that, then maybe it would be.
Right.
I don't know.
4 of these at once, yeah, that would be within 4 minutes. You have to finish one per minute. That's not a problem, right? Yeah, it would be for sure. 4 of those. Yeah. Right, 4, yes. 4 for sure. This is the king size like that, the 4 put together. And it's definitely, yeah. Here in Israel, it doesn't, yeah, you don't get to those sizes. Everything's big in America.
I bought one back.
Yeah, Wow. Okay. So, yeah, so.
So that means instead of the caramel, there's cookies and cream. So that means there's also
Even more, in the
cream.
cream is even more cookie, more mizana. So it's for sure,
Again, totally
for sure, 4 of them, 4 of these put together is definitely one.
It's not good.
It's not good. It doesn't say it's good. Okay. That's what we spoke about in the beginning of the shir about external things. Sometimes they make it sound yummy and delicious, and then the inside isn't that good. Anyway, to finish up, to summarize, so we're saying like this, that if it's all prepared together, cooked, baked together, then the moment there's even a little bit of mezonos inside the 5 grains, and it's not meant just for consistency or for binding or for such things, rather it's for taste or for filling you up, then it's mezonos, no matter how much is inside there. And if it's if it's just there for binding, for consistency, then it's the other ingredients decide what the bracha is and not the mezonos for a first bracha. And for the last bracha, we're always looking at the amount you ate. If you had of the mezonos component itself, kazait within 4 minutes, 27 cc volume within 4 minutes, then you sell a michya for the entire food. If you hadn't had that amount, and if the rest of the components, the rest of the ingredients did sum up to 27 cc for a kazait, and if within 4 minutes, you say bari nefasha. So whatever the other ingredients call for as a bracha chrona, that would be a bracha chrona. Within 4 minutes, right. Right. The volume of 27 cc. Piece of 50, but that's gram. It's not the volume, it's the weight. And it includes everything else. Right, but it's not right. We're not going about. It's not the volume. The volume is how much water would take you out if you push it into a cup. How much water would come out? 27 cc. It's hard to figure out every time, right? There is a book, by the way, a cool book, a very cool book. It's I don't know what the name is exactly, but it's like Kazait Kil Chata or something like that. It shows you actual size of many, many, many foods and pictures, actual size of how many of that type of food, how much of that type of food has to be eaten for a kazai. It's a very, very good book to have. We have one at home. And then we can tell by each and every cookie or fruit or biscuit or pesach zman, like each one on its own, it shows you how many you have to eat to make up a kazait. So it's something worthwhile to have at home. And then you can always you start getting used to the amounts, sort of, but you have to start feeling for it a few times, and you start getting used to it. Okay, so that's it for today. Have a continuous Shavua Tov.
Shavua Tov, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Shavua Tov.
Very welcome. Call too. Bye-bye.